today we're gonna see how this goes. I have been trying to get myself to sit in this chair for the last hour and a half, maybe, because I would rather be in bed. But this is important to do. I want to do it as well as possible, and if I wait any longer, who knows how much I'm going to forget. With that out of the way, today's book is For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. This book, when I first opened it, because I actually read it, kudos for me, right? I really liked it. Sorry guys, I think I'm gonna itch a lot. I don't know what is wrong with me. Maybe because it's cold outside, it makes me itchy. Maybe I'm allergic to something. I need to go get my allergy prescription, so maybe that is why. In any case, if I'm doing a lot of this, please bear with me. When I first opened this book, I was extremely impressed. But the problem for me came in that the voice, the tone never changed. It was exceptional for the main character. But then to have every other narrative voice sound exactly the same, I got bored after a while. So this isn't necessarily a bad book. I just thought that there wasn't enough difference amongst the characters for me to say, like, if I just picked it up and didn't know which chapter I was in, I wouldn't necessarily know who was talking because they all sound the same. On to a little bit of plot. And before we even go there, I have to say I really enjoyed the main character and kind of his craziness. I mean, the guy is truly messed up, but he's very similar to Dolores Umbridge in that he has a cause that he believes in and he pursues that. You can't really fault a guy for believing in something when it's not necessarily a harmful belief. The way they go about it might be harmful, but he just has a strong sense of right and wrong and morality and like what people should be capable of doing. When he feels like they are underachieving or they're not meeting his expectations, he just handles things wrongly. On to plot. There are three, oh my gosh, now my eyes are itchy, which is the worst because I wear contacts. And if you wear contacts, you know how annoying it is to have to scratch your eye and not knock out the contact. Let's just bear with me, people. There are 3/4 narrators of this book. The main character is this guy named Teddy, who teaches at a prestigious private school called Belmont Academy. And he is the guy who has these expectations, and when people fail to meet them, he basically seeks justice on his own. This extends not just towards students, but also towards teachers, because he came up without a silver spoon. He sees all of these students with their money, and then he sees his fellow teachers who had been Belmont students, and what he views as the special treatment, I don't quite know how much of it is to be believed, because in some respects, he's unreliable. If he sees something that he thinks needs to be taken care of, he does this. So this is where all the problems start. Along with Teddy, there's a student named Zach. There is another teacher named Sonia who is about to celebrate her own anniversary at the school. And then there's a girl named Fallon. She used to be a student at Belmont. However, Teddy didn't like her. So then when she asked him for a reference for college, he basically said that she cheated and she wasn't going to be a good fit for these schools. She didn't get into any of the schools. She became a failure in the eyes of her parents, and her life just went downhill. At some point, she learned the truth behind why she couldn't get into any of these schools. She came after Teddy. Teddy doesn't like Sonia. He has been testing out poisons. You don't really know, or at least I was not quite sure what he ultimately wanted to achieve. And what he'd been doing is in the teacher's lounge, they have a Keurig. He figured out that he could inject the pods with the poisons from these plants that he had in his yard. And not even just the poisons, but like there's this one really high-strung teacher, so he would inject her pods because he would watch them. He would figure out what they would drink. He would inject her pods essentially with a drug, and it would loosen her up. So yeah, like he would just test things out. But for Sonya, he was gonna poison her, basically just to make her sick. What ends up happening is the day of her ceremony, one of the students' mothers, who's kind of in charge of the social committee, ends up dying. We get Teddy thinking, oh my gosh, it's me. And then we actually have another character who we get a little narration from, and his name is Frank. And he's also a teacher. And he's thinking it was him who killed her. Spoiler here, it was actually Teddy, because he had spiked the pods, not knowing that the women organizing this gathering were going to use the pods from the break room. Just previously in the book, Sonya had gone home sick. This was Teddy testing the strength of the dose. I mean, it's been probably a month since I've read this book, so this is my fault for not going back and refreshing my memory. But I don't have time, and I'm unapologetic. We're gonna move forward. I'm not sure if when Ingrid dies, Teddy had been attempting to murder Sonya. In any case, it sets things in motion because Zach is friends with Ingrid's daughter, Courtney. Teddy likes Courtney. He likes Courtney because he believes that her mother had a hand in him getting Teacher of the Year. He likes her work ethic. And I think it's funny because apparently Courtney has just a really good facade. She's not that great of a person. He doesn't know that, which is ironic considering that's his whole goal in life, is to make sure his students turn out to be well-rounded people. But Courtney doesn't have a good relationship with her mother because her mother is pushing her in directions that Courtney doesn't want to go, and it's a fraught relationship. So Courtney is then accused of killing her mother, and she's arrested and she's put in jail. So now Teddy is like, how can I rectify things? He ends up going through certain motions which should have made things better. But then Zach, who is worried about Courtney, coerces a guard so that he can go see her. He does it again, thinking that everything will turn out okay. I guess the guard grew a conscience, and grew a conscience. I need to go to bed. Went to the FBI or whoever and said this is what's going on. And so then they go and they are like, well, obviously Courtney and Zach were colluding to kill her mother. So then Teddy has to continue going through steps in order to get Courtney exonerated. In the end, it works. In the very end, Teddy dies because Teddy's a psychopath. What happened was he does end up killing Sonya. The whole great thing about Teddy is that personally, he's a psychopath. Professionally, he's a really good teacher. And he does, for the most part, get along with the other staff. However, he has his own sense of justice, and that's why things are happening. Zach notices things, and he ends up, like Fallon, starts to follow Teddy. He ends up recognizing that Teddy's a bad dude. Teddy needs to be punished. He goes to the FBI, and it is left open-ended as to how seriously the FBI took Zach's warnings, but in the end, the school, throughout this whole novel, had been preparing for this dedication ceremony because the original headmaster, or maybe not the original, but the previous headmaster had committed suicide. Why we're trying to memorialize a guy that committed suicide, I don't know. I thought that whole storyline was unsatisfactory because I kept expecting it to somehow tie back in with Teddy, or maybe even with Fallon, and I think on some level it does, but we'll get back to that. Eventually, things settle down enough, and they have the ceremony. Teddy is killed by that other teacher who thought he had killed Ingrid, which I'll get to him as well, Frank. Frank finds this poisonous berry, he crushes it up, and he puts it on the covering that is underneath the statue that the committee has decided is appropriate to memorialize whatever, and it just blends in. Teddy, who had been under a lot of stress for various reasons, had this habit of biting his nails and like picking at his skin, and so the poison gets into his skin. He goes home, and 2 days later he dies. Part of me, no, actually all of me, really hated that Frank got caught, because I thought it would have been really nice justice for Teddy to just die. Like, it goes unsolved, that there's never any mystery behind his death, but just maybe he died of natural causes somehow. I don't know. I kind of wish he'd played it off that way. I do like this aspect, the way it ended. As I said, Zach had gone to the FBI. At this ceremony, he is expecting the FBI to show up and arrest Teddy, who has become the new headmaster. He's doing the ceremony, and so the FBI never does. But then when Teddy dies and Frank is discovered as the murderer, we learn that Zach changes his life plan, and he decides, you know what, I'm gonna become a teacher. And you don't really know what kind of teacher he's gonna be. Is he gonna be a good teacher, or is he gonna turn out like Teddy? Because seeing that doing good, going to the police and trying to let them handle it, got him nowhere, but then seeing this other guy commit murder exacted the justice that needed to happen. And so I liked that aspect of it, where because Teddy was ultimately taken care of by murder, Zach, at this impressionable teenage age, realizes, like, maybe it's almost like Teddy himself. Maybe we have to take matters into our own hands. So on that level, I liked that Frank got caught. On the other level, the deal with Frank and why he thought that he had a hand in Ingrid's death is he is a very devout Christian. I think he's Catholic. Yes, he must be Catholic because he becomes a priest. He's married, he has a child, and then he goes to an event sometime in the past. He starts talking with Ingrid. She invites him out. He gets drunk. We are under the impression that she doesn't actually get drunk, but she gets him drunk. And he's an attractive guy. He's relatively young. At some point, she starts to blackmail him with a picture. This is basically in order to get Courtney through school so Courtney can get to the Ivy League that she needs to be in. Frank is guilt-ridden. He is angry. He is bitter. And so what he does the morning of Sonia's anniversary ceremony, he sees Ingrid taking decorations inside. He spikes her water bottle with not protein shake, but he's really into working out. So it's something that he uses when he works out. But in a certain concentration, it can lead to bad things. So he is thinking, oh my gosh, I killed Sonia on accident, only to be informed that she never even drank from the water bottle. But then this sends him into a tailspin, and I guess he already had a fragile psyche. I thought he was a little underdeveloped. Not that I minded his descent, but I kind of wanted to know who he was before all of this happened. Where was he mentally and emotionally for this to just landslide so quickly? He ends up going to a psych ward, and then from the psych ward, he enters the priesthood. Then he ends up killing Teddy, And he blames it on the fact that he knew Teddy was a bad guy. I forget what it is that he actually knows, but there are things that he's aware of that lead him to believe, like, Teddy needs the Lord. Teddy needs to repent. He visits Teddy multiple times, and then when Teddy doesn't repent, he realizes that he has to take matters into his own hands. I hated that it was so benevolent. Like, it came from such a pure place. I thought it would have been cool if he was really just more vindictive rather than thinking like he's doing the Lord's work. Whatever, not a big deal. But yeah, so Frank, he's complicated, but he's confusing. Ergo, he's not complicated because I don't feel like I know him well enough to understand why he's complicated. That's complicated. Let's talk about Fallon. Fallon was probably my favorite character. She is angry at Teddy for sabotaging her future. After Teddy does kill Sonia, Fallon steps in and is the temporary replacement. We learn that she never graduated college, so I don't quite know how she was able to teach at Belmont, except that she's a Belmont alum. I think she may have fudged her records or something, but it did occur to me that this school should be a little bit more discerning if they're so prestigious. I don't know, teachers out there, enlighten me. She does it essentially so she can keep an eye on Teddy, and that's what she does, is she starts to follow him around because she knows there's something wrong with him. Then Zach starts to follow Teddy because of the things that he has witnessed. I do think it's interesting how then they team up, and it's tragic because here's a little bit of spoiler. Fallon dies because Teddy realizes, like, she emails him and she emails Zach. She uses a pseudonym, but she essentially says, look, I know what's going on. Teddy realizes it's her, and so then he goes to her apartment, and Zach sees this. He's like, Teddy should not have been there, or he should not have been there that long, at least. And so then when Fallon comes home, he says, hey, he was in your apartment. She goes in there. Nothing seems amiss. She's typing out something else. I forget what exactly it is, but something damning, something evidentiary. She's like, oh, I'm so tired. And the next thing you know, she died because Teddy messed with her water heater or something, and she died of carbon monoxide poisoning. I was so sad because I was like, she was the one redeeming character in this novel, the one character that was actually working towards something and gonna make things better. It's not a whodunit. I thought this was really clever. Someone wrote a review and they said it's not a whodunit, it's a why done it. And it really is. So it's not like I needed a character to throw wrenches into the mix to make me question who was behind it. But I liked that she created points of interest. She created stumbling blocks. And without her, it was a little less interesting. And there were definitely moments when I was reading Teddy's perspective that I skipped because he's really one note. As multi-dimensional as he is, he doesn't grow. After a while, it doesn't really matter what he's doing or why he's doing it because it all serves the same end. And so I was like, okay, blah, blah, blah. So the fact that Fallon then dies, I was disappointed. I liked Fallon. I thought she was funny. I thought she was clever. And nobody else was. Talking about Teddy, another part of this novel I thought was a bit underwhelming was the wife subplot. Because in the book, or in the book jacket, you get a sinister impression about what's going on in his marriage. I'm here thinking he killed her too, and he's buried her body, and he's pretending she's still alive. Where the reality is really, she left him, and he was pretending that she didn't. And it took a really, really, really long time to learn what happened between them. I wouldn't have minded so much if we'd gotten more of them. What I liked at the beginning was you didn't really know what was happening. At first, my impression was, yes, she had left him. She was no longer in that house, whether she left him or whether he killed her. She was not in that house, but he would phrase things that made me question maybe she still was there. But then we would go on these long tangential, I mean, we all know I know about tangents, like, hello, that's all I ever do on this channel. But these tangential storylines, and we completely forget about the wife until we get back to Teddy. And by that point, I didn't really care anymore. I guess I would have preferred it had been presented differently, because then I would have had different expectations. I think that's also something that is a contributing factor to why I don't like a lot of the books I read, because their book jackets are so much more interesting, but they're relatively misleading. You do go into a book with a certain expectation. You have an expectation as to what the plot's going to be, how certain plot points that are in the dust jacket are going to be addressed, and then depending on genre, you have an expectation that this book is going to meet genre expectations. When they don't, I mean, the book is probably a fine book, but it doesn't tick those boxes, and it fails to be what it promised to be. Back to the wife. What happens is Teddy, we already know he's a psychopath, but he doesn't do well with people. He's kind of awkward, but he meets his wife, they get along, they get married, but one of the things that he told her he wanted was kids, and he never wanted kids. When she continues to bring it up, he makes all these excuses. Eventually, he realizes he's just gonna get a vasectomy, and then he's gonna lie to her about basically why they can't have kids. They're just gonna continue to roll forward with life, and she will be none the wiser. But then Fallon shows up. She learns the truth. She learns what he did. She writes a bill that she sends to the wife, and then the wife leaves Teddy because he lied to her. Not only did he lie to her about wanting kids, but he lied to her about why they aren't having kids. That is about all that we get from her. And so why she had to make it into the dust jacket, I really don't know. But she is sort of a key factor, but then not a key player. Her leaving Teddy is the reason that he starts to bite his nails, which is why he ultimately dies. I think the stress of her leaving is not good for his mental health, but I wasn't convinced that she was important enough for me to care about. Yes, in all of this, Teddy is much more difficult on Zach than on any other student, and we get this from the very beginning. But he's just trying to teach Zach a lesson. He's trying to teach Zach that he can't get everything he wants just because he's rich. He can't get everything he wants just because his parents step in for him. Like, he's gonna have to work for it. And even though Zach might deserve something, Teddy's not gonna give it to him because he's gotta teach him a lesson. And so I really enjoyed seeing the way that Teddy came after things. And it's basically the same reason as to why, sorry, I feel like I have like little bird feathers, like fluffed feathers. Not a problem, not a problem, not a problem. Squirrel! So what he did with Fallon was he was like, this girl is too entitled, so I need to take her down a couple pegs, and then ultimately he sabotaged her future. Did he see it as doing something wrong? No, he thought that he was doing the right thing because this is how Fallon was going to learn and grow, and then in the future, her having to work hard would end up with her becoming a better person and thanking him. You will thank me later. For the most part, when I think about Teddy, I like Teddy. But while I was reading the book, I did think he got a little monotonous. He had this really strange quirk, though, that I thought was really interesting, and all the women in the book club brought it up. Even the author was like, yeah, I didn't know so many people were going to respond to it like that. But he has this thing for milk. You know how most people, after a hard day, come home and pour themselves a glass of scotch or something. Teddy does milk. He reserves milk and he only drinks it out of a glass bottle, and the only place that serves milk in a glass bottle is this liquor store, and the owner continues to stock it because he knows Teddy will buy it, but he reserves it for special occasions. And he's like, oh, I didn't do so well today, or this or that or the other happened, and I don't deserve my cup of milk. Those are the little things that made Teddy great. But the big things were like, Teddy, you're kind of a whiner. I wish you would do something or like change your perspective so that you stop doing this. You know what I'm saying? In terms of the dedication ceremony, I didn't quite understand why they would memorialize this headmaster. Because that's not normally something you do. If he had died tragically, I could see it. But because he committed suicide, and maybe this was explained in the novel and I never picked up on it or I've forgotten it, I didn't understand why they wanted to do it. I know, and they decide on a rock, which I think this is quite the commentary on today's society about how we have all these limitations about what we do and why we do it because we don't want to be offensive. And I'm like, is there such a thing as being too politically correct? I think so. Anyways, so they land on a rock. The headmaster, I think what had happened was he was headmaster when Fallon was in school. Fallon somehow learned that he had a gambling problem and he would participate in online gambling while at school. Obviously, that's a no-no. I think she then was using that to blackmail him into getting what she wanted in certain respects. And so I don't know if it was this or if there was other things or if it was a combination of a lot of things, but he ended up killing himself, or if it had nothing to do with anything and he was just fragile and he killed himself. I kept waiting for his death to tie into the plot in an interesting way, and it felt a bit more glossed over than it should have been because of the whole, like the entire novel, they were planning this dedication ceremony. And so for me, I had this expectation that the dedication ceremony would be for something a lot more important. But then again, as I said, maybe there was more to this ceremony than I remember, and it was more important than I'm making it out to be. Anywho, that is For Your Own Good. It's an interesting novel. I was gonna say fun, but it's not a fun novel. I started skipping quite a bit towards the end. There actually one more point that I wanted to make that I thought was kind of fun about Teddy is he, again, this is something that I wish I'd understood better or I wish had been opened up a little bit more. He, at some point in the last 10 years, had begun posing as a teenage girl on the internet. His explanation behind it is that he wanted to know his students better. He wanted to know what was going on, not necessarily specifically, but just in general, the feel of what was going on with teenagers so that he knew how to teach better or make them better people. I thought that was incredibly interesting because what kind of person do you have to be? And he didn't necessarily do it in a predatory way. He didn't catfish anyone. But what kind of person do you have to be to pretend to be I don't know, someone of the same sex, someone of the opposite sex, but somebody who is not you and someone who is significantly younger in a pedophilia kind of way. Like, what kind of person do you have to be to do that? I wish we'd seen more of that. We saw him get on every now and again and kind of troll. We got the backstory behind how it happened and how it evolved and how it got to where he is now. I would have really enjoyed seeing it be a bigger plot point because it would have helped him be more sinister. And I wanted him to be more sinister because it was a great juxtaposition with his almost mild-mannered nature and the way that he is pursuing justice, not because he's a bad guy, but he believes that this is the right way to do things. Anywho, that is for your own good. Check it out if you feel like it. Will you be wowed? I don't know. It could have been better in some ways. So maybe that's it for you. You know, maybe you'll like it, but it could have been better. Or maybe you'll love it, because when I was Googling reviews, it had astounding reviews. People loved it. It just depends on who you are. From me to you, have a wonderful day. I'll see you later. Don't forget to do all the fun stuff like liking and subscribing and whatevering. Bye.